A Sussex man who received blood contaminated with HIV in the 80s has welcomed the news that the government has ordered an inquiry into the scandal, which is claimed to have cost more than 2,000 lives. Mark Ward from Peacehaven was one of the haemophiliac children given the blood in the 80s. He's been involved in a long-running campaign along with families of haemophiliacs and others who were infected with both hepatitis C and HIV from imported blood products in both the 1970s and the 1980s. The Conservative MP, Sir Peter Bottomley, is welcoming the decision.
I'm pleased it's come. I would preferred it to come earlier, but I'm very glad the government has now seen the merits of having this inquiry. The key point is that they must have powers to get documents, because these will have to come from pharmaceutical companies and government sources. I think it's unlikely to end in prosecutions, partly because people were acting for the best motives, but they just made catastrophic mistakes.
Well, joining me on the line now, Mark Ward from Peacehaven, and he was given that transfusion when he was 14 and then told he would not reach his 18th birthday. Thankfully, he's still with us. Mark, lovely to have you on the programme. What's your reaction, first of all, to this news?
Oh, well, good afternoon. It's mixed emotions, because I'm actually over the moon that finally we have, after many, many years of campaigning and calling for a public inquiry, we now appear to be getting one, and that's fantastic. I'm sad because obviously I've lost so many friends along the way, people that, because this is so tragic, it binds you together very, very closely. You actually, you have a real connection with each other. You're not just friends. And when you lose them, a little bit of you goes with them each time, because it's another step closer to you going. So there's great sadness that they're not here to see this, and then I've got trepidation as well, because it's fabulous news, but there are the detail is going to be in the devil is going to be in the detail, I think.
The way that this has affected your life has just been devastating, really. You know, what you've been through, the health issues, losing your dream job. Can you ever live life without bitterness, as you know, after what you've been through?
I've always tried to focus my energy on something positive. And there have been very, very dark days. I mean, when a doctor tells you that get your affairs in order because you've got weeks to live, you're going to end up on a life support machine as a vegetable, that really makes you focus on your life. But I'm not going to say that I've become bitter, because then that defines you, and I will not let them define me. I focus my energy into the campaigning, but also my work in trying to protect the future generations. So I've said all along, I can't be uninfected. I am actually, they can't help me. So I can now do everything I can to ensure that this never happens to another haemophiliac, another generation, any other disabled person, because at the end of the day, we are a small, vulnerable group of disabled people born with a genetic blood disorder, as you said, and because of that, we've been treated as second-class citizens. They've basically taken all safety measures and thrown them out the window.
Of course, since you had that original prognosis from a doctor, fortunately, the treatment of HIV has improved dramatically, and hopefully that the stigma is somewhat reduced. Has life got a lot better for you over the years?
I'm not going to say a lot better, because sadly the stigma is still there. And in fact, one of the things I was saying about being positive, I'm over the moon to say I am a stakeholder in Brighton and Hove's City Council's application to become a fast-track city for the UNAIDS Project 90-90-90. And the area that I'm actually working on with them is HIV stigma. Because when I've gone into hospital recently, in the last few years, I've actually been subjected to HIV stigma from health professionals. Because, you see, I'm happy to say that I'm an openly gay man, which in the 80s, growing up with severe haemophilia, was a taboo subject. But because I've gone into hospital, they've seen this openly gay man and just assumed that I got HIV through being gay. When I've told them the truth and how I was infected as a child, their attitude towards me has changed dramatically, and they've become really compassionate and exactly like you would see nurses and feel them to be.
You have found love, haven't you, a relationship, and was that difficult given your diagnosis?
Over the years, nobody likes rejection, but over the years I've had some real horror stories. I was dumped on Christmas Eve one year because the person I was seeing couldn't cope. But no, I'm happy to say that I am madly in love with my husband, and because of the person he is, no, it's never been difficult, and he loves me for me, and he supports me all the way in this. He's been totally with me, and if it wasn't for him and my mum, I don't know what I would have done. I don't even think I would be here, actually.
This has been such a long campaign to get to this point after all your work, after your involvement with all those other families. It must be an incredible relief to get here eventually.
Yes, it is. As I say, we've got to look at the boundaries of this inquiry, because you see, one of the things that they have said, in fact, in the debate in the House today, is that anybody who has evidence of crime should go to the police. Well, I actually contacted the Chief Superintendent of Sussex Police back in 2012, and he wouldn't meet with me because he just believed that it was a civil matter. I then wrote to the Metropolitan Police Chief, Sir Bernard Hogan-Howe, and they refused to meet with me and fellow campaigners from Tainted Blood. We've been saying breaches to the Nuremberg Code, which is the non-consensual testing element, perverting the course of justice. Many, many things have happened. Even the tampering of people's medical notes. You know, I'm a severe haemophiliac, and according to some of my medical notes, I never had treatment in years where I had major surgery. So there are elements that need to be looked at, and I am happy and looking forward to playing my part and ensuring that everybody, and it's easy to focus on the bereaved and the infected, but we've got families that have been with us every step of the way. Like I said, my mum has been my rock, and she has been there all the way through this, and sadly, the mums tend to keep being forgotten. So I'm banging the drum for my mum.
Mark, a pleasure to talk to you. Thank you so much for joining us on the programme this evening.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Mark Ward in Peacehaven. Keep you up to date with the latest as that inquiry has been announced. Now, let's take a look at one of the other big stories that we've been covering today. It's been called the worst treatment disaster in the history of the NHS. In the 1970s and 80s, it's estimated that more than 7,000 NHS patients were given blood products infected with hepatitis C and HIV. At least 2,400 people died as a result. Now, the Prime Minister has ordered an inquiry into the scandal. In the Commons, the Health Minister, Philip Dunn, apologised to the victims.
I'd like to start my contribution by offering my personal apology to all those who've been affected by the tragedy of infected NHS-supplied blood and blood products. This has had a terrible impact on so many individuals and families, and I know that it has quite rightly been the subject of many debates in this chamber.
Well, many of those affected were patients with an inherited bleeding disorder called haemophilia. They needed regular treatment with a clotting agent made from donated blood. At the time, the UK imported blood products from abroad. Some of those supplies turned out to be infected. Well, Mark Ward from Peacehaven in East Sussex was one of the haemophiliac children given the blood in the 1980s.
It's mixed emotions, because I'm actually over the moon that finally we have, after many, many years of campaigning and calling for a public inquiry, we now appear to be getting one, and that's fantastic. I'm sad because obviously I've lost so many friends along the way, people that, because this is so tragic, it binds you together very, very close. You have a real connection with each other. You're not just friends. And when you lose them, a little bit of you goes with them.
Well, the Prime Minister's spokesman said the decision to hold an investigation was prompted by new evidence. It's not clear what that evidence is. The announcement came shortly before MPs held an emergency debate on the scandal this afternoon. Families will now be consulted about what form the inquiry should take. It could be a judge-led inquiry or a Hillsborough-style panel. The Labour leader Jeremy Corbyn welcomed the announcement and said the inquiry should have the potential to trigger prosecutions.
It was obviously a serious systemic failure. I think we need the strongest possible inquiry that can, if necessary, lead to prosecution and actions as a result of it, but above all, get to the bottom of it. So a broad, public, inquisitive inquiry is very important.
Well, the Health Secretary has described it as an appalling injustice. You can read more on this story on the BBC News website and, of course, all the latest in our breakfast shows tomorrow morning.
Loving where we live.
This is BBC Sussex.